although this ends happily, we have to have a song in here that's going to have something expressing regret, longing, loss. After Robert leaves, Marianne realizes she really, really does love him with that, and although she's actually sent him away, with that in chains, actually, she betrayed him and he's been arrested. She says, I love him so much with that, and sings the song, Lover, Come Back to Me. basically took a bit of a nosedive with that. 1929, the stock market crash happened. It was expensive to put on these big, lavish productions. And so what happened is, producers said, we need to really scale back everything that we're doing. And that happened a lot. But Romberg continued to create a few works for Broadway. And I actually did have a slide for the next one, but I took it out for the sake of time. But I think I'm going to just talk about it anyway because of Dr. Sargent's comment earlier, mentioning that I was going to be speaking to you on Sigmund Freud. And just to make sure that I do what Dr. Sargent said I was going to do, there was a show in 1935, a very innovative show called May Wine. And the main character was a Viennese psychoanalyst clearly modeled on Sigmund Freud. And what happens in it is the show opens and this psychoanalyst is there in his home. And his gentleman said, I just killed my wife. And the police enter and are saying, what do you mean you just killed your wife? And he said, I just killed my wife. And then the whole story is told in flashback, which was very unusual, very innovative. And what happens, we realize that the psychoanalyst is in love with this woman, but he's also being blackmailed, and he's in love with her, but he's so shy. He can't express to her how he really feels about her. So he has a life-size mannequin made. So, and his friends tell him, this will work, just practice saying romantic things to this mannequin. And then when you meet her in person, it'll be okay. And something that happens very innovative with how the story is told is there's a play going on, but then whenever we're hearing what the characters are thinking internally, that's when the song happens. So if you know the more recent musical Spring Awakening, they do the exact same thing. That's 1935, that was Oscar Hammerstein and Romberg with that idea of how to tell a story. And of course it turns out he didn't shoot his wife with that, but he shot the mannequin. So everything's okay at the end, but we do have a psychoanalyst as a Viennese psychoanalyst at that as being sort of the title or the principal role in a musical from 1935. But where Romberg really did succeed, though, was in 1945, a show called Up in Central Park, subsequently made into a film. Rodgers and Hammerstein are on the scene by now, and this was based on 19th century New York with that, and the whole idea of Currier and Ives being very popular. And it has a lot of dancing in it, the idea of a ballet starting out the show, so dance being used to help tell the story, something Rodgers and Hammerstein had really done a lot to promote with both Oklahoma and Carousel. So here we have Romberg showing, yes, he can be up to date. He doesn't have to be rooted in the world of 19th century waltzes. He does that because he wants to. This was a show that showed he could do things in a more contemporary vein. And when he died in 1951, he was working on a show called The Girl in Pink Tights, which was all about, sort of, the story of this Broadway show from 1886 called The Black Crook. In many histories of the Broadway musical cite The Black Crook as the first Broadway musical, because it had a very long run in New York. What happened at this time, the typical thing for a musical was that it would always be on tour. You'd play 2 weeks in New York, you'd play 2 weeks in Boston, you'd play 2 weeks in Washington. So the day of a long New York run, yeah, New York was just a stop on a tour with that. But for the Black Crook, actually staying in New York for a long time, up and to establish the idea of a long-running Broadway musical. And one of the curious things about this, again, this is showing Romberg being innovative, is it's the girl in pink tights. And if you look at the image on the left, what profession is this girl in pink tights? She's a dancer. He's creating the major role in an operetta for a dancer with that. So again, trying to think about very innovative things. You have a dancer as the lead player with that. Romberg also, remember I said his career plummeted on Broadway after the New Moon, stock market crash. Also what's happening late 20s, right around 1930, the rise of Hollywood and synchronized sound on film. Remember the Desert Song, the first entire sound adaptation of a Broadway show. That's 1929. Romberg realizes there's money to be made in Hollywood. Things might not be going so well in New York, so like so many people, Cole Porter, the Gershwins, Romberg went to California, to Hollywood, and did several films in Hollywood, one of which is Viennese Nights from 1930, which is actually a very, very fine film. It looks at all the operetta tropes. There's elements that can be recognized from the student prints. And here we have elements that can be taken from basically everything Romberg did. We have two young people who are in love but cannot be together, and their grandchildren realize their love. Sound familiar? That's the plot of Maytime. It's set in Vienna. We have ideas here of some German-sounding music, things very much coming from the student prints. And what happens in it is we have Elsa, who sings in beer gardens, in cafes. And she goes on to have a significant career. This was played by Vivian Siegel, who created the lead role in several Romberg productions. She was the very first Margot in the Desert Song, so again, we're having these connections happen. And here's a still of her. And what happens a lot in the film, because they're trying to negotiate what is a film musical going to be, because people thought when you see a film, that's real, it's documentary, how do you do a fantasy story with this? And so they're trying to figure this out. So what happens in this and many other early film musicals, we have sequences showing all the musicians. So we have music taking place in a concert-type setting. And what happens, it's 1930, Romberg was from Vienna. You know, or I should say, he spent a lot of his formative years in Vienna. He adored Vienna. He knew because of World War I, that Vienna was gone. He loved it. There was a sense of nostalgia for this old Vienna. And he wrote a waltz, a love song. And here, it's not a love song between two human beings. There's plenty of those in the show. But we have a love song to Vienna, written in 1930 for the film Viennese Nights, and we're now going to hear Jessica sing You Will Remember Vienna. host selections of pieces from his operettas, with that as well as music of other composers. And this proved to be very, very popular. And then in the 1940s, he toured with the orchestra, chorus, and soloists throughout the country, doing an evening with Sigmond Romberg, including selections from his own works, as well as what we might consider today to be light classics. With that, Johann Strauss waltzes, for example. And these concerts being immensely popular. He also made records with this orchestra, such as A Pilgrim of Dinner Music by Romberg. With that, and really felt when asked, so what do you like to do with that? And Romberg would reply, I want to use music to make people happy. So that was his ultimate goal. In his concerts, today when we think of an orchestra on stage with a conductor has his back to the audience and is facing the orchestra. Romberg would position the orchestra sideways on stage. So Romberg is actually standing at the side of the stage conducting with this. The orchestra could see him. Things were set up so sound would project. The reason, he did not want to miss the audience's reaction. And he said that was so important to him. Are people enjoying this? And if they're not, he realized he needs to do something to change that. He said the only way he's going to do that is for people to actually watch the audience. And with this back to the audience, there was no way that that could happen. So again, someone very, very concerned about this idea of music and music being used to make people happy. Going back to Hollywood with that, The Night is Young, another film musical from 1935, had all the makings to be a really great film. Great singers, Ramon Novato, one of the great actors of the 1930s, Evelyn Leigh, who had appeared in many Romberg shows in London, very well-known British actress. She sang the first roles in The Desert Song and The New Moon when they were being done in London. Very, very respected. We have Romberg's music, we have Oscar Hammerstein's lyrics. What could go wrong? Well, a lot actually went wrong with that. The story was, in many ways, a remake of The Student Prince. We have an archduke who falls in love with someone from a lower class. There's that student prince. She's a dancer. Remember the girl in pink ties, that a dancer to that. Romberg's interested in this. But what happens at the end, just like in The Student Prince, they are not together at the end. The dialogue in this film is absolutely dreadful. It is beyond dreadful, and actually that's why the film failed. You read every criticism and they just say, yeah, there's some great music in here, great singing, but they say the dialogue is just absolutely ridiculous and sort of just takes all the sentiment and all the emotion away from this. But what does happen in this show is, again, one of Romberg's greatest songs. When I Grow Too Old to Dream, which Oscar Hammerstein wrote about this and doing this lyric and saying he wrote this lyric and then thought, are we ever too old to dream? This when I grow too old to dream, does it ever occur? So something to ponder with that. And I want to read to you a quote. When Romberg died on November 9th, 1951, a good friend of his sent a telegram to Romberg's widow. This friend was a city manager of Kansas City, Missouri at the time, and the reason Romberg came to Starlight Theater. When you drive to KCI, there's that street, LP Cookingham Road, that people drive on. Next time you go to KCI or LP Cookingham Road, realize that Cookingham was a very good friend of Romberg. With that, they were very, very close friends. And what he said to Romberg's widow, to Lillian, in a condolence telegram, the world has lost a great composer, but he will live forever in the greatness of his music. And with that, I'd like us to end this afternoon with a performance of Romberg's wonderful waltz song that he wrote for the night is young, when I grow too old to dream.
I'd like to really thank Bill Everett for coming over and giving us this talk today. It was pointed out to me that maybe I made a mistake by saying which university you are at. It's the University of Missouri at Kansas City, and not University of Kansas. Well, I said that. But who knows what I say. Okay. That's so